Welcome to Season 3 of the Knack for Business podcast. Over 250 episodes strong, we're here to ignite your entrepreneurial spirit with fresh insights, networking gems, and creative strategies that elevate your game. Are you ready to discover what your Knack for Business truly is? Your hosts are Bernie Fransgrote from Creative Insight and Wayne Pratt from Motivate You Inc.
Today's topic is the profit of clean. Disinfection technology saves money and lives. Question for the audience. How can you ensure your business is truly disinfected without wasting time, using harsh chemicals, or leaving harmful residues? That's what our guest is all about today, Roy Barroso. He's the founder and chief growth officer at ALMASO IGP. Roy is a recognized expert in facility management, commercial real estate, and advanced cleaning solutions. With over 30 years of industry experience, he brings deep expertise into strategic planning, sustainable operations, and regulatory compliance. As a multilingual communicator, fluent in English, French, Portuguese, Spanish, and Italian, Roy seamlessly connects with diverse industries and stakeholders. Today, he joins Knack for Business to break down the game-changing impact of the KleenShield Solutions C100 Dry Fogger, explaining how its innovative dry fogging technology and hypochlorous acid, or HOCL, disinfectant provides cost-effective, residue-free, and highly efficient sanitization for businesses. With his extensive background in building maintenance and service management, Roy offers invaluable insights into why traditional cleaning methods are no longer enough and how businesses can adopt next-generation disinfection to protect their customers, employees, and the bottom line. Roy, welcome, sir.
Favorite quote saying. I always say that the language leads to conversations, conversations leads to relationships, and then relationships get you the business that you're looking for.
So you've had a diverse career. We see commercial real estate, facility management. What led you into the path of the commercial cleaning industry? What brought you to this ballpark?
It has been serving commercial property and facilities from the beginning. Textile service provision to environmental services and then into the building maintenance world. I was approached on almost all three industries by my network. As within the textile piece, where I spent 8 years at ILS, that was a network contact that got me into commercial real estate service provisions, from uniforms to matting to all kinds of textiles that any industry would need, from massage therapists to hospitality to mechanic to industry to manufacturing. I got exposed very quickly and right out of the gate to all those industries just by dealing with the commercial property piece. When I went into environmental services, same thing. I was dealing with the same customers in a different capacity, but in all those varied industries, and way more industries were added to my docket. Larger company, larger service provision, larger territory, everything like that. When the building maintenance world came and got me, it was because of that network and that exposure to those industries that they brought me in and wished me to help contribute for growth and quarterbacking those growth opportunities and building markets and expanding markets, because I had so much hands-on, not only operational, but sales piece in those industries, getting those clients to come on board. So that really is how I got into the maintenance side of things. And it just shot from there. Within everything I've done, hospitality and environmental construction and such, gave me an in-depth, intimate view of how these industries operated. So it was easier for me to provide service, or at least bring value in what the companies are trying to provide, because I knew the inner workings.
That is a really good stretch. And actually, you being in different facets of similar industries probably helped you out a lot in perspective changes. You're in the linen supply versus the building maintenance piece. It helps shift the gears. You understand the overall picture, good holistic view.
Yeah, no, very much so. Just the exposure to all the industries, knowing just enough, having just enough familiarity and understanding of the function of operations within all those industries, let me actually provide or know what service to provide to help them out. When you know the inner workings, you have a bit more exposure into things, you can actually build a proposal or understand what services they truly need without fluff. You don't have to have all these extras. You only need A, B, and C, that kind of thing. To me, it's a more direct and fair way of providing service because you're not trying to upload or anything until they need more service.
The one thing that impressed me in our previous conversations is how you're able to. It's one thing to know a product works well in a certain space, but also the budget for it. What's going to be the best fit? It's time, material, and labor. And those three pieces coming together, understanding it, you really are good at crafting that. I guess this experience in all these different sectors then helps you understand what's going to push or pull business as the driver, right? The KPIs.
Everybody has what they need to have happen within their organization, and they have to document it or they have somebody to report to so that they understand that's what's happening and that the mandates are being met. If there are processes needed to be added or implemented, then you have to put them in place. And hopefully the workers or the management, whichever teams are responsible, have every tool possible to make sure that happens.
You are showcasing a piece of equipment that automatically sanitizes that you got familiar with during the pandemic. Can you tell us more?
The C100 Dry Fogger, which is a KleenShield product, was invited to one of the initial demos. And after seeing the demo and where it was manufactured, I thought the large public spaces with high traffic volume would truly benefit because of its capacity to disperse the mist up to 8 meters and very widespread. The existing air can grab it and place it on surfaces where it's really needed. It's sometimes hard to reach, to be quite honest. Knowing that's happening, you're creating safe zones free from bacteria, viruses, and other contaminants. We saw it through a major pandemic. We know what it needed. We know what has happened. And I think now we have better equipment, better solutions like the C100 to address those going forward. God forbid it happens again. But in the interim, I think awareness is way more important for facilities that have the high traffic in the public space, occupancy, daycares, fitness centers. Those tenants and those occupants of those spaces can be reassured that there are measures in place to prevent them from getting sick.
So when you look at this particular device, what makes it more effective than, say, a handheld device? Because the device is about the size of a small bar fridge. It's a little taller of one. What makes it more effective than, let's say, a handheld device and someone's like waving a wand around?
That's exactly it. There are two applications. There's the fogging, a standalone unit that does the work. You just have to move it to the areas you need to. An electrostatic application, which is a handheld, throws an electric charge into it because of the way it's designed. But you have somebody to hold it, have to walk around and do all the services manually. It's much more labor intensive. It's accurate in regards to spaces that need to be applied. High touch points are always the ones: door handles, tables, chairs, computer monitors, keyboards, mostly actually. Anything that's being handled consistently, especially in washrooms, the handles, the seats, urinals, everything's getting touched at some point. When you're doing it by handheld, that individual has to walk through the entire building. If you're doing it with a fogging device, it will shoot it out there and catch all those nooks and crannies that the handheld may not, or that the human eye won't catch, or may not, because they're just going around, bringing it, brushing it nicely, evenly, but doesn't mean that it's catching absolutely everything. With the mister, it's shot in the air where it lands. When it comes in, you have now a better coverage and a more susceptible area of pure disinfection than just doing high touch points with the electrostatic.
So the other part of this equation, the dry fogger pushes out a dry fog, or it could be a heavier set fog depending on the nozzle type. The couple other key pieces out of this is the chemical that it uses, hypochlorous acid called HOCL. Can you tell us a bit about HOCL? What's the science behind it? What is it going to eat everything up, or what?
No, it is a non-toxic item which has no detrimental effects to health or surfaces, by that matter. It disperses it. When it's dispersed, it basically attaches and kills what virus or bacteria is on there, like, immediately, right? So it is the pure piece of non-toxicity. It minimizes any chemical footprint because it's biodegradable. And might as well classify it as water to a degree, but it has its element of disinfection because of how it's generated, how it's created. And it doesn't leave any residues, nothing that would transfer into another touch or another material. Those are pretty much the properties of HOCL.
So I understand it's made from water, salt, and electrolysis. And so other cleaning chemicals, how dangerous are they? And could you aerosolize them? Like Mr. Clean, which is typical for residential purposes. What's the difference between that and those type of chemicals?
In the amounts that those products are used are in the norm ratings of safe, unaffected, will not affect the human environment as such. When you aerosolize something like a Mr. Clean, now you're affecting the indoor air quality because that's a manufactured chemical compound solution. You're going to breathe this stuff in. When it's applied with a cloth on a surface or whatever, it dissipates and evaporates very quick because you're not using a very big amount. But if you were to aerosolize something at 1 to 5 microns and put Mr. Clean into a room, regardless if you walk in that room 15 minutes later, you're going to smell Mr. Clean. And you're most likely going to breathe in Mr. Clean because the particulates haven't really settled yet. There's various ways to look at it. The C100 fogger applies an uncharged droplet, so it rests on the areas where it's closest to. An electrostatic application sends a charge into the droplet to force it to attach to something, no matter what it is. But it's also very direct in regards to handheld application. I haven't done too many large fogging that has charged droplets because the fogging machines nowadays in the industry don't have it. The electrostatic ones do. They don't have the big machines.
I've seen the doctor's office being the most obvious fit. Do you think there'll be a time where it'll be rare to go into a doctor's office and not see one of these units?
Now, knowing the dynamic of a doctor's office, let's say, where the waiting rooms are there and all that, I find with doctor's offices, because there's a lot of nooks and crannies, they have many little offices, many practitioners now working within those offices. The waiting rooms in the public space are now normally not as large as perhaps they used to be, but clinics and hospital waiting rooms, the way to go when it comes to disinfecting an area. And just seeing what I saw yesterday being in the ER here at Queensway Carleton Hospital, like I walked into, there was at least 50 people already sitting there. And surprisingly enough, I was in and out of there in less than 4 hours. So I was really impressed by the service there. Everybody has to wear a mask as soon as you walk in. So the disinfection, having a C100 in there 3, 4, 5 times in a 24-hour shift would at least blanket the disinfection for the area because there's chairs everywhere, there's tables, there's all kinds of surfaces being not only just sat beside, but you have little children sneezing and coughing and adults sneezing and coughing. So the contamination level is huge. And the probability of you catching something is even more serious. And my viewpoint, medical centers, especially on the waiting areas, not so much the equipment rooms or the actual observing rooms, triage rooms, because they're small and concise. They need to be a manual application in there. But on the waiting rooms, corridors, and everything else where there's the traffic flow, absolutely I see benefit.
Do you find that the economic benefits of having this machine versus other machines or even other chemicals in the healthcare profession in the past where you have cleaning staff, sometimes in residential applications, you have to wear gloves when you're using chemicals. You're not aerosolizing it in the air, but you're applying it to a surface. I remember one time a staff member did not wear the gloves and for the longest while, no issues. And then one day, a rash would break out and went through the usual thing. What is the benefit of using HOCL and the C100 versus the traditional chemicals? What are the cost benefits for the business? I've just touched on the staffing. What are the other elements that can be a benefit to a business?
Again, or they're trying to ensure that those patrons or occupants of the facility have the best secure, safe location. So if they have a rigid disinfection protection, disinfection / protection method in place, then and improve it by doing testing, ATP testing or whatever, to ensure that, then those tenants and occupants are going to be much more comfortable walking into the building. The savings and such is that the manual, anything that needs extra attention is always going to cost more. You will reduce the labor intensive pieces of the workload by having a larger application done more frequently, but you'll also have the cost of the chemical. Because if you're buying 2 or 3 different chemicals to address all-purpose cleaner, specialty cleaner for certain rooms, and then, a protectant, using 3 levels, right? Regular janitorial, APA 1 is the highest level of clean, and that's what the clients want all the time, mostly, right? So when you reach that type of level, disinfection sanitization is an automatic understood, right? It's APA 1, it's reaching the top level of clean. Other processes injected or implemented will have a cost associated, but it's going to offset what labor you needed to address it. So that's the biggest play here. And the cost of HOCL and those others, because if you're topping one on top of the other, yes, you disinfect, but maybe you want to protect now and use antimicrobial protection, which is another product altogether. It's a whole other application. So a pilot would have to be conducted to ensure that the manual labor is being removed by use of the product and how the product's being applied. You need a person to move the C100 around, but it's not a unit that has to be manned, where electrostatic has to be manned, manual application, wiping. Those are the differentiators in cost. At the end of the day, the chemical cost is probably not as big a factor as people will think, because you get a lot of coverage from these products.
Roy, tell me about an electric device. Tell me about maintenance and what happens if you don't maintain it properly.
The unit is well contained. It's about a 2 square foot by 3 or 40 inches high type, nice rectangle on casters. Simple build. It has its nozzle at the top of the unit, which disperses the 1 to 5 microns, which is a preset amount that we're using right now. It can be adjusted to other micron levels depending on the product. Always ensuring that the nozzle itself and spout are clear after each application is wiped down. The tank where the HOCL is kept is very straightforward. It's sitting on an interior shelf of the unit with a compressor underneath and tubing for disbursement of the product up to the nozzle. There are measurements in the interval applications. You can have it at 1 minute, 2 minute, 3 minute, depending how long and how large the space you're doing and how often you're moving the product. 110, a regular 110 electric outlet is fine to operate it. There's not a lot of maintenance, to be quite honest. It's been manufactured in a way it's maintenance free, except those points, as I mentioned, that the nozzle, you don't want any clogging of the nozzle, and you want to make sure after application, your tank is clean, ready for the next application. The compressor, again, is running on the electric, just a flick of a switch. It loads up. When it's fully ready to go, you just hit start.
You mentioned ATP. What's that?
Adenosine triphosphate.
What's that all about?
It is a surface testing method that uses this product, which measures surface enzymes and uses a luminometer to read these readings. So basically you have the surface in its condition normal as it is, or let's say after the janitorial crew has done the cleaning, and you swab the surface with the adenosine triphosphate swab, cover the surface well with the swab, and then put it into a vial where you shake, which releases the liquid to activate the reading. And then you put it into the luminometer so that it reads and gives you the actual intake monitor's percentage of clean. And you have different levels. So you have a 0 to 30, 31 to 99, 100 to 199, 200, etc. 0 to 30 is a food grade safe, where food prep can be done right on that surface. 100 to 199 is a clean. Regular clean, no problem, no dangers, no nothing. Anything over that, you start to get concerned. You're in a yellow flag type thing saying caution. And then anything over 300, you now have some contaminants that you want to get rid of. So You can go up, I've seen readings as high as 1,500, depending on how many contaminants are there. Door handles are the biggest one because everybody's touching, handling their food, smoking, moving things around. The contaminants are high level.
One other question to ask is one of the things I've seen here in Canada, and there's probably a US version of it. Is there some sort of metric that says this is government approved? So when someone uses HOCL, is there some sort of rating that says this is effective? What's the story behind that?
If you're going through Canadian health standards, you're issued a DIN number, right? It's a designation number for the product. It has met the criteria for being a safe product for use. HOCL is a safe product. The safety data sheet indicates details on its safety, gives you a breakdown of it, and basically indicates that anyone can buy it off the shelf because it has passed all those tests. You have some that have to have special handling. I've worked with antimicrobial products that are in the same category. They have a DIN number. They're safe to buy off the shelf and order it online, and there's no restriction in using it. It's more of a protectant than it is a cleaner. It doesn't clean, it protects. Coats the surface and protects from bacteria and viruses to attach themselves to the surfaces, where HOCL is the one that actually gets rid of those things. Two different applications.
If you were to deploy the C100, it does its dry fogging. Does it matter if you have plants in the area or pets in the area?
No, it doesn't affect anything, not to my knowledge, knowing what I have on the product and seeing where we've had applications. It doesn't do any damage to anything. It might as well be classified as water because it's that close. It has its components of disinfection because of how it's charged in the manufacturing process. But it's a safe product. There's no history of it damaging anything.
Excellent. So I guess you don't have to wear PPE then, personal protective.
There's no necessary. On my teams in the past, rubber gloves and everything were always just a standard application regardless. You can handle it. HOCL can fall on your hand, let's say, as you're filling the jug or whatever, and there's no chemical reaction that you're going to burn like an acid or anything. Nothing like that's going to happen. But standard practices, most cleaners are always wearing gloves. That is probably the extent of the PPE you need to do.
So the chemical that it uses, that it deploys, we talked about the device, and you said you saw it in its genesis stage being created. So where is that? Is that somewhere in North America?
This is Hobie Industries here in Ottawa, Ontario, just in the south end of the city, where they manufacture not only the C100, but other products worldwide for different industries. And they have a pretty neat setup, how and where it's produced, as well as some very intelligent individuals behind the science and behind the design, not only on the manufacturing and or creation side of things, but on the operation side of things. The individuals involved are very understanding and methodical when it comes to the operation of the unit, making the adjustments where they thought necessary. It's a simple unit to operate. There are only three major components that you have, being the nozzle, the actual tank for product, and the compressor. Those are the three main operating pieces within the unit. Once you know your interval of application, you can adjust it. It's a little dial, a couple of little ticks, and you're off to the races.
One thing that interests me is because you are using a dry fog, I'm guessing it's safer around electronics than a lot of cleaners are that can muck up motherboards and things.
Yeah, it's got a pretty quick dry rate. Residue, I haven't seen any that has been an issue or anyone has communicated an issue. Other chemicals, when you're wiping, it depends on the cloth you're using. You're using microfiber cloths, which is the standard across the board, and it should be a certain color. We use a color coding system when it comes to specific areas of cleaning, where red will be restrooms, yellow will be stainless steel, green will be all-purpose for office desks and furniture. Various companies use this method. It's the best way to keep track of cloth inventory and usage. But there are cloths out there like PVA, which is a cloth that just needs to be used with water and clean stainless steel and mirrors like nobody's business. So I would see it on a computer screen that it would be highly effective too. but there are chemicals that can leave a residue, and it all depends how they're being applied. It's all on who's doing the work and how well they're paying attention.
You indicated that you saw the device in service. Where was that?
At the Hive location in Ottawa, they have a shared office space services model where people can come in and rent office space daily, monthly, hourly, as they need it. It hosts a various number of industries that use the space for those purposes, more administrative and meeting rooms. They have several meeting rooms. They have common space applications too, where let's say there's 3 or 4 of the same team needing to do some jamming, some brainstorming. They can either use a room or they can use one of the cubicle spaces close by each other to work on some programming or some development pieces. It's got a food service location in it, as well as private offices, kitchenettes, restroom facilities, and a few other pieces with a shipping and receiving area in the back. A very welcoming public space that you see every industry going in there that needs temporary housing, if you want to call it. We used it on a process there a couple of months ago, and put that into place early December, and wanted to illustrate or demonstrate the effectiveness of it. We also did some ATP testing there, which showed improvement from the disinfection. We had readings from raw data to after clean data to application data, which is good to create a baseline. There are sequences that can be adjusted depending on what kind of results you would like to see, especially after a janitorial application, how often the application has to be done. Is there a weekly service, bi-weekly service? That's going to all encompass into what disinfection looks like after an application.
So it almost sounds like the high volume traffic space where people are coming and going. I'm going to also suspect then, like in the retirement homes or places where people are immune compromised, this would be a good value added layer of protection. It doesn't replace any other housekeeping details, but it's another layer of protection in the overall process that protects that population. Would that be fair to say?
Yeah, it would be. With the fogging, you're doing a certain coverage, especially in high areas and apparatus that are apparati that are above reach. A lot of that work is done on periodic schedules. So high dusting will only be done once a month or once every 6 months or whatever the case may be. Whereas if you have a fogging process in place, you'll be able to reach those areas. They're not in contact with people, but they're at least being disinfected. Hard to reach areas are basically just dust collectors at the end of the day. That's all it is. If they're flat, they're collecting dust, and that's why you have to have it. Because if they were not, if it's all vertical, it'd be much easier to service. Having that process in place will allow the janitorial crews to really maintain or focus on the high touch points, which are really the transfer points. It's not a plant in the corner. It's not a decorative painting or anything like that. That's not going to contaminate anyone. Door handles, tables, desks, phones, coffee makers, all those things that are those are what needs to be. These are the items that need to be addressed. Airborne is airborne, but we haven't found solutions yet for all of that, except for wearing a mask.
In your experience, have you found that I know there are other technologies out there, and they are line of sight technologies. UV light, for example, is used in some instances, but I also understand UV light has an issue with it affects our eyes, and or it can degrade plastics or other surfaces after exposure over a period of time. When something is fogged, does it just go where the air goes and it gets around the corners where your finger might have reached? Like when you go to get up off a chair, right? If you grab the arms, your fingers go underneath, but the UV light wouldn't see that. Is that another advantage of some other approaches for cleaning?
Yeah, I mean, you're going to get those hard to reach places with a manual process because the hands are actually wrapping around. Or let's say if you're doing an electrostatic application, you could probably get underneath. From what I've seen, 50%, 60% of those areas are never touched. When you do a defog sprayer, it's not a live enzyme. It's not a live thing that has its own brain and say, oh, I've got to make my way under here. It's not going to happen. So the misting does, depending on angle and where it's falling, you're shooting this big cloud up and it's coming down and attaching itself to everything in the way. but only on the vertical side. There's no wraparound or underneath. If those concerns are in play, then the application on the manual piece would have to be enhanced just because of the intricacy of it. Even with antimicrobial, it doesn't decide to envelop an area because it knows it's a doorknob or it knows it's a chair handle. Like, not going to happen. So those are other technologies, and was it nanotechnologies? That's what they're working on, that kind of stuff. Yeah, we'll leave it up to the scientists for that. But spraying and fogging is 99% of it just the surface at hand. And that's the main concern. That's where most viruses are caught.
Let's assume this is a fit. How much money should you be putting aside to either lease or buy a unit for your office?
Again, I'll use the example I know kind of offhand, but within their maintenance budget, probably set aside $400 to $700, not extra, but within their budget, disinfection. As part of their regular routine janitorial frequencies, the scope of work, in the disinfection piece, where they want to have it individualized or on a separate line item, disinfection must happen throughout the course of the month, every month or whatever, how many times a month they want it done, with which equipment, and that they've set aside a budget for it. That budget should encompass the unit itself, how much product they believe they need to use over the course of a year. Let's say they could build it into their scope of work proposal, as if they're asking janitorial companies to propose. So that the provider, apart from the customer saying, I'm going to do this on my own, or says to the janitorial company, I'd like it fogged once a week or whatever the case may be, do you leave it in the hands of the janitorial company? Or does a company say, I know I'm going to purchase it because this is for my workspace and my people. I will make sure that the janitorial staff are trained on the unit so that when they come within their routine and it's in their scope of work, they can fill the tank. They're trained on the operation, and they'll do the sequence of fogging as they do the rest of their daily chores. The fogger does an area, they go down, perhaps they'll do light dusting in the offices while the machine's running its cycle, move the machine to another area of the building, go do another set of offices and garbage changes and recycling, maybe a few washrooms while the unit's out there fogging, and then do the sequence like that. That's how I would believe. The dollars and cents of it all in around that figure. I may be off a little bit just because I haven't done the full exercise myself, but I'd say that'd be a safe numbers to play with.
So at the end of the day, how do people get a hold of you?
I have ALMASO IGP website, www.almasoigp.com. I am on LinkedIn under Roy Barroso. That represents, obviously, I'm the Chief Impact Advisor as well for ALMASO in LinkedIn. And that's pretty much it. I have my email, roy@almasoigp.com.
I want to say thank you to Roy Barroso, my co-host Wayne Pratt, and you, the Knife for Business listeners. If you want to understand how to do sanitization, cleaning your space effectively and efficiently, Roy's the man to chat with. You want to understand more about the C100 Dry Fogger from KleenShield Solutions? Reach out to Roy.
To reach the podcast hosts, email them at info@creativeinsight.com or by the website creativeinsight.com, spelled KREATIVINSIGHT.com. To reach Wayne at his email, wayne@motivate.uca. That is MOTIVE, the numeral 8 and the letter U.ca, or his website, motivate.uca. If you would like to be a guest on this podcast and share your knowledge, let us know. We would also appreciate your feedback on the content or format. Check the show notes for more details. For these podcasts, we like to acknowledge the support and thanks to the following people: Carl Richards from Podcast Solutions Made Simple, a renowned podcast expert; Fred Crouch, who is the Property Wizard podcaster, where Bernie is a co-host; Javan Strika from At Hive, a co-working space that is more than just a space; then Melanie Weber, Bernie's invaluable business partner; and Wayne Pratt from Motivate.U Inc., who serves as both a coach and co-host of these podcasts. Disclaimer: please note that the Knack for Business podcast episodes are meant solely for educational and general informational purposes. The information and opinions contained within are not intended to be professional advice on any subject matter. The thoughts, views, and opinions expressed by the participants are their own personal beliefs and do not represent the views of the podcast hosts or any affiliated organizations. It is important to note that this podcast is not a replacement for consulting with certified experts in your area who possess knowledge of your unique situation. The hosts of the podcast, along with any participants or affiliated groups, do not take responsibility for any actions taken or not taken based on the information presented in this episode. It is highly recommended that individuals seek guidance from their own personal advisors in fields such as accounting, law, or other pertinent areas prior to undertaking any actions or making decisions that may impact their financial, legal, or other aspects of life.